right. Well, finally, got this thing back on the road. It's been a few months since I did the last podcast. A little bit has happened since then. The big thing was that my wife had a baby on Thanksgiving. My sweet little Willow, Yvonne Cecilia, was born. And I thought that that would be a good starting point for this particular podcast. And as I'm doing double duty right now, I'm going to show you here. For those who are watching this podcast, there she is right there. Dad's doing the dad thing. Look at that little angel. Oh, my goodness. It was an interesting experience. I will say that. I won't name the hospital just because I don't want to get sued. But it's weird being a dad in 2024. My wife noticed this before I did. I just am kind of used to it, I guess, at some point. And I'm not woe is meing about anything in particular here. It's just more of an observation. So this particular hospital, let's just say, was the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And my wife goes into labor at night. We get up early in the morning. So first things first, you start off with calling the doctor. So they always, you go to all of these different prenatal, screenings and doctors. Doctors want to see you if you sneeze, right? When you're pregnant these days, and everything is about covering your ass. Everything is about that. And I mean that, and it's just kind of sad, really, because this is my third child. My first daughter was born in 2009, and then my son in 12, and much different experiences at two other hospitals. One was in the city of Chicago. A great experience at Swedish Covenant Hospital, right there on Foster in California. And then my son was born at this other hospital that my next daughter is born at. And in that 15 years since my daughter's been born, that experience was, it was like out of a movie type of thing where you go in, we take the Lamaze class beforehand, the birthing class, whatever they're called now. You go to the hospital and you get a tour of where you're going to be, where you can expect to be, and all that. Well, my friends, if you are a dad or parent that is thinking about having a child, none of that exists, at least not in this particular hospital anymore. They want to do everything online. They don't even want to do classes about birthing or breathing online or in person anymore. Sorry, I'm getting distracted because little baby Willow is starting to get fired up over there, so I might have to stop this record, but I'll come back either way. But let's see. Well, we'll see. So yeah, that was interesting because everything that we took, and my wife is very diligent about taking classes to make sure that everything is in order as far as preparedness, and everything was online. You couldn't do anything in person. You couldn't go to the hospital and get a tour of the birthing center in person. I've gone to do these things for stories for this website, for other CBS and WGN in the past. No problem. Come right in, shoot, video and all this stuff for a story at certain hospitals. But God forbid that we wanted just to know where to go the day of the birth in person. Like, my wife is a visual learner, meaning she's got to have tactile things and see it and go through it. It's really hard to do that virtually, but that's the only option we had. So we did that, and we did all the classes, and they do the birthing classes, and they do the breastfeeding classes, and how to be a dad again after 12 years classes to an infant and all that good stuff. And it's all mostly okay, but you are the victim of the person doing the class virtually, which we all have been there before, where the person that's on the other line kind of sucks. They're not great at being attentive in a class setting, or have a terrible voice or whatnot, all those things. And we had various forms of those things throughout, and a lot of these things are dictated by the insurance companies and who the hospital works with, yada yada. But on the morning of, first of all, 4:00 in the morning, she's going through contractions, right? About 5:00, we call the doctor's office. And that's what they tell you to do, is when you think you're in labor, you call the doctor's office. So we call the office. It's an answering service. Well, you would think, right, that an answering service for a doctor's office, that is a doctor's office for, a woman being in labor, an OBGYN, all that good stuff. Do you think they would have a little TLC? Well, this particular answering service sucked. This person hung up on me because I was frantic. I call them. I said, I think my wife's in contractions. What's your name, sir? I tell him my name. What's your date of birth, sir? I tell him my date of birth. What's your wife's date of birth? Blah, blah, blah. What's the due date of the baby? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I just need you to call the doctor. And should we come in or not? Because clearly you're the answering service person. You're not a medical professional. I just need you to say, hey, Tom Barnes is calling. Call him back. He thinks his wife in labor. Do you think that's a thing? No, it is not. It is not a thing. So at like the fifth time of asking the same question, I was like, what does it matter her due date? I think she's due today. Her due date's Friday. And she was arguing with me on whether or not Friday was the 28th or the 29th. I said, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. You have to sleep. Like, I'm like, ma'am, I don't know. It's Friday. That's the date. Today's Tuesday. Friday's the due date. But I think she's in labor today. And this woman said, I'm just doing my job, sir, and hung up on me. Straight up. That was my first experience dealing with the doctor's office that my wife chose. And it's been a little weird, with like the customer service is just gone in healthcare. It is gone. And I'll further that by saying, we gather up everything. We have the go bag, we get in the car, we drive up to the particular hospital that we're at. And, we pull up to the area from the virtual class that I think is right. And it's the furthest building east where they have a little drive up. And I will say this, they do have valet and it's wonderful. And the valet service is great. So I run inside and I think I'm at the right spot, right? So I run inside, I talk to this person and they're like, oh yeah, you're in the right spot. John over there will get your car set up. So I say, my wife's in labor. She's in the car. I think we need a wheelchair. So I go outside and then there's this woman who is probably mid 70s. Mind you, it's 5:30 in the morning. And she grills me about valet. Is this valet? I'm late for an appointment, all this stuff. And I'm like, ma'am, I think it's valet, but you're going to have to go there. But can you get the valet for me? I'm like, no, I can't. I'm like, my wife's in labor right there. And she wouldn't move out of the way for me to open the door. She would not move. She was like, but I'm going to be late for my appointment. And I finally said, ma'am, I understand. I'm like, I really don't care. My wife is in labor, and that's my concern. I said, this gentleman here who is from the hospital can help you with that. And she wouldn't move. Finally, the gentleman's like, ma'am, you need to move so we can get into the car. She was insistent that she get her valet taken care of over my in labor wife in the car who couldn't get out of the car because she was blocking the door. So that was my introduction to the first part of having a baby in 2024. So then, we get inside. It's very chill. You go upstairs, it's early in the morning. But here's the funny thing. And this is the world we live in right now, which is just kind of sad. You get inside, you go up to the birthing unit, you take elevator B. That's the one thing I remember from the stupid video. And you go up to the area and, it's 5:30 in the morning, 5:45 at this point, and there's a nurse's station on the birthing unit, right? And do you think the first thing they say is good morning or how are you? Not even to me. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking to my wife who's in the wheelchair in labor. How are you doing, ma'am? How can we take care of you? Anything like that? No. You know what the first damn thing that they said? Can I have your insurance card? That's the first thing they said. Can I have your flippin' insurance card? I'm like, what is going on? I was like, okay. So luckily I had the insurance card ready to go because I kind of had a feeling that this is how this has gone based on other things that I haven't even talked about in this podcast. Anyhow, so we get that straightened out. We get brought into the triage room, which is new. I don't remember 12 years ago what the birthing process was like. But now in 2024, you go to the triage room, then you go to the birth and delivery room, then you go to the recovery room. So 3 rooms. So we get into the triage and and it's a room that's like got 3 beds in it and they got the dividers, by the sheet. So you're in triage, your wife's in labor, and you're sharing a room with 2 other women who are doing the same thing. It's not relaxing whatsoever. It's very awkward because there are bodily functions happening in that room. I'm not talking about the labor part. I'm talking about poop, pee, all the things, somebody throwing up, all of that stuff is happening in this room where you're supposed to be in a relaxed environment. This is anything but relaxed. It's the opposite of relaxed. It's terrible. And the nurses are okay. I remember one particular nurse, this is not her real name, so I'm going to make up the name. We're going to call her Genevieve. She was very attentive to my wife, but did not acknowledge my presence in this room, which fine. You know what? The wife's in labor. I'm just here as a support person, partner, husband, all the things, right? So we're in that room though for a while. So, an hour turns into 2 hours. And then, of course, this is where it all begins. The Genevieve comes back and says, "Oh, you know what? Well, we're going to get you up into birth and delivery in 15 minutes. We're going to come back in 15 minutes." 45 minutes later, she comes in, says, "It's going to be in another, we're just waiting on the room, like we'll get you into the room, yada, yada." Another 30 minutes goes by, and now my wife has already started labor. She hasn't had her epidural. She's gotten sick because the pain is so bad. And there's all these other people who've been taken away since then, right? So they might be in worse labor or further along labor. It's not worse labor, but further along in the labor process than we are, which totally I get. Her due date was Friday. This is Tuesday morning at this point. So, whatever. Um, we stay in that triage room for probably in total 3 hours. Do you think Genevieve, the nurse, acknowledged my presence at all during that time? Now, again, I'm not giving birth, and I get that completely. But as far as helping my wife and being a good partner, do you think the nurse would say, "Hey, how are you? I'm so and are you the father? Are you the partner, brother? What are you?" Then you say who you are to this woman and this child. And then maybe you would think they would give some advice on what to do, in the room, because that's not like a video is going to tell you any of that, like because it's a different set of circumstances. You're in this birth and or this triage room. Your wife is shaking because she's in pain. She's already gotten sick, and she's clearly in some kind of labor. I don't know if it's active labor or whatever labor, or if it's Braxton, whatever. Nothing. They don't say anything to me. Nothing. I've said things in the room. They don't acknowledge my presence. They ignore me. So my wife kind of looks at me the last time it happened because I asked a question. She didn't answer me. Then my wife asked the question, and then she answered her and looked right at her. I mean, this nurse hasn't even made eye contact with me, and it's been 3 hours. So then we finally move from the triage room to the birth and delivery room. And that is a whole other room. It's kind of like a mini apartment almost. You got a bathroom, it's a nice place in this particular hospital. And the nurse then, when we're walking in with all of our stuff, 3 hours at the hospital now, 3 hours, she finally turns around, looks at me and says, "Hey dad, what's your name?" 3 hours that I've been in that stupid triage room. 3 hours it took her to turn around and ask me my name and assume that I was dad. So, which was nice because then I finally said, "Oh, my name's Tom. Thank you." Blah, blah, blah. And then, that nurse kind of had that particular behavior throughout the rest of her shift. And then this other nurse came in for like the delivery part of the shift. And we'll call her Betty. Not her real name. Betty is a name, but Betty was great. Betty, for my wife, Betty was amazing. She listened, but it took Betty a solid hour for her to start like including me in the conversation and include because my wife was increasingly getting in more and more pain. And so like who wants to answer questions about, your date of birth and, what's your pain tolerance when you're at a 9 out of 10 on the pain scale, right? So finally, I kind of just insert myself into the conversation and start answering for my wife because she's like, "I can't deal with this woman. You have to talk to her." So, but then Anne kind of picks up the cues and starts like including me on all the conversations, which was a nice change of pace, right? So, the birth, the delivery, active birth is about to happen. My wife starts shaking on the table and she's like, "I need the epidural. I need it now." Because she was trying to be a champ and go without it. But it was just why? Why? When you can have an epidural? There's 100 reasons why, but there's 100 reasons why to do it. So either way. So she gets it, and that process was like awful, and I get it. You're sticking a needle into your spinal area. I think it's to make it does something to the nerves. It doesn't go into your spinal cord, but it does something to the nerves, kind of cuts off the pain, whatever. But that process, the woman, the woman administering the shots to my wife was like, "You're going to feel a little pinch here." And then my wife's like, shaking and screaming. She's like, "Ow, ow." I don't know. I've never had an epidural. I don't know. She was in labor. I'll give him a pass. After that was done, she starts relaxing. The nurses are like, "Oh, it's going to be not until Thanksgiving morning. This is a Thanksgiving baby, blah, 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 blah." So we're like, "Cool. We're just going to wait it out." Now, mind you, at this point, it's Wednesday, So 3 hours. We were in labor and delivery all night. Into now we're in the hours of Wednesday morning, and am I telling the story right? I gotta make sure I'm telling the story right. Um, Either way, now it's Wednesday. I mean, we might have gotten there Wednesday morning at 6 o'clock in the morning. Now it's Wednesday night. That's probably more what it is. Sorry, not Tuesday. We got there Wednesday. So now this is getting into the later hours of Wednesday night. They're like, this is not going to be until Thanksgiving. This baby is not going to be here until Thanksgiving. So my wife's laying there. The epidural's starting to really take effect. The nurse comes in and she starts including me on the things, and all that stuff is working great. Then my wife starts like shaking because of the pain. And they're like, "Well, you just got the epidural." I'm like, "Well, can you examine her? Like something seems a little off here." And the nurse then checks her for the dilation and like, "Oh my goodness, you went from a 2 to 6 in like 20 minutes. Like well, you're in active labor. That's why the pain is bad, yada yada yada." So then they come in because of course, it's Thanksgiving week and the hospital, I don't know understand this. First of all, it's a hospital. People need medical care every day of the year. It doesn't matter if it's a holiday or not. But with hospital administrations, it seems that they're trying to like eliminate overtime because there just wasn't a lot of people in the pharmacy that was providing all the drugs for my wife to use, like the epidural. Because when the person that brought in the epidural, they're like, "Oh, usually you get a bag first before the shot, but I'll do the shot now because the bag's not ready." The bag wasn't ready for 3 hours. Like 3 hours, my wife had to wait for this other. That's why she was shaking because she didn't get the full epidural. So when she started going into active labor, her body started to like convulse because it was of the pain, and she was freaking out. So then we had to call somebody, and then they finally brought in the bag, and then it calmed her down, and then she went into active labor, and she literally pushed for 25 minutes. My baby girl that was supposed to be due on Friday the 30th ended up coming on Wednesday the 27th at 11:55 p.m. She even make it to Thanksgiving. She wanted to come in before Thanksgiving and party for Thanksgiving. And fun fact, she was born to kind of two songs. We had a big playlist, 12-hour playlist on shuffle randomly, and the songs that she was born to, like like I would say, let's say the last four pushes. One of the last four pushes was "The End of American Girl" by Tom Petty, and the three pushes that got her into this world was "Everlong" by the Foo Fighters, and which was incredible because that's one of my favorite songs. But in that process of like, oh, it's go time. Do you think that they told the dad anything during that time? Anything at all? No, nothing. Three women came in, which were great for my wife. They were like, it was like women strong, which was great. And I was happy to see that because it doesn't matter how I feel, really. It only matters how my wife feels. Obviously, she's the one doing all the work. But it was weird because my wife is like looking at me when they're talking and she's just like doing this thing like, "Are you hearing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hearing this, but I'm sitting over here." They never said, "Okay, dad, come on over, it's time, help grab mom's hand and push, and here's the things to do." Nothing. They said nothing. So me being me, I just was like, "Well, screw this, I'm gonna walk over there and I'm gonna just be a part of this because I've done it twice before and I kind of remember but not." So I just went over there and I was holding my wife's hand and giving her, ice chips like out of the movie. But there was three women, one being the doctor, or there was four at one point. The main doctor, then the pseudo doctor who delivered when the main doctor kind of left, and then the two nurses. I don't know who the other nurse was. She was just kind of there holding up a leg and telling her to push, and the other nurse was the delivery nurse Betty. And Betty was great, but they never directed anything to me. I just find it so funny. And again, it's not about how dare you ignore me? That's not what this is at all. This is, how do you not include the person's partner in any of this? Just for a support standpoint. Like, hey, Bob or John or, spouse or partner, like you could really help your partner by doing X, Y, or Z. None of that was conveyed. It was just like these doctors and women, they were all like in there helping her and telling her the things. And I was trying to be in there. But it got carried away to the point where when Willow did eventually come into this world, they were about to cut the umbilical cord. And when my wife snapped at them, it's like, "That's not your job. Like, I want my husband to do that." And they're like, "Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. Where's dad?" Where's dad? Where's dad? I've been standing right there next to her for 20 minutes. I leave for 2 seconds to go and I get some more ice chips and they're like, where's dad? They thought that they were going to cut it. So I got in there, I cut the umbilical cord, all was fine. Um, and then that was it, right? So we're in that room, they like pat off the baby and you kind of just hang out there. But here's the weird thing. We have the baby. And this is why I think maybe this is at every hospital. I don't know. But certainly at this particular hospital, it seemed like there was nobody working that day because we sat in that room after the baby was born for 4 hours. 4 hours, 3.5, all said and done 4, but 3.5, we sat there and just waited. My wife, like they had to, sew her up and do all the things because she had some stuff happen down there. The baby's on there, but like my wife is exhausted. She just gave birth. She's on her skin to skin, just like waiting there and then like wondering what's happening. And they're like, oh, we're going to get you up into recovery. It should be no more than 45 minutes. Yeah. It was 2 hours later, 2.5 hours later after that, where we're just like, what is going on? We're exhausted. She has not slept the entire day because that morning, Tuesday night into Wednesday morning is when she had the contractions. So she was up all night. Baby comes at 11:55. Now it's Thanksgiving morning at like 4 o'clock in the morning. She hasn't slept. So she doesn't want to fall asleep with Willow on her, and she hasn't been like, none of the stuff that you need to have done to clean, none of that happened yet. So she's very new and we just don't know. We don't have any direction and there's nobody coming in. Awesome Betty nurse is gone. There's nobody there. They're just kind of like, meh, yeah, we'll come back and get you when we have time. So eventually we get up to the recovery room and then we have this nurse who must have done a line of cocaine before we walked in because she was like on speed telling us all these things. And it was all insurance medical jargon. She literally had a pamphlet in her hand and she's going through the things. And she says, I know you're not going to remember any of this, but I have to say this right now. And that's where I go back to what I said earlier at the beginning of this podcast was that everything's about cover your ass. And that is the insurance company only because they're like, oh, are you sure you want this? You want this? And they sign it all out. So this woman comes in. She's like, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to come in there every 2 hours, make sure baby's this, baby's that. She was fine. She was attentive. She just was, a little much for 4 o'clock in the morning. But we get settled. And then we get into the delivery recovery area fully. My wife cleans herself up a little bit. She's just hanging out in there and we're just surviving the day. So it's now Thanksgiving Day. And we get a new nurse and I forget her name. We're gonna like what is her personality match? Let's call her Marge. So Marge, who is an older nurse, who's got some flair on her whatever she's wearing that day. She's kind of tough love kind of a nurse, but she doesn't like she says she'll come in every 2 hours to check on baby for temperature and whatnot. That didn't happen. No, it didn't. She didn't come in. There was a point where it took them 3 hours to come and give Willow a bath. And that's what they said. They said, we'll be back in 15 minutes. And then 3 hours goes by, nothing. Mind you, in that 3 hours, we didn't get pictures taken because we were waiting for her to get cleaned up. My wife can't walk because her leg is numb from the epidural. So she needs help getting to the bathroom. And I can't give her that help because it's like dead weight. So they have like this standing wheelchair. I've never seen this thing before, but it's for people who like their legs are wobbly, but you can like lean on this thing and you can get to the bathroom. Well, there wasn't one in the room. They took it out. So the nurses had to bring it back. It took them 3 hours to come and help my wife to the bathroom. 3 hours. So, and again, during all that process, do you think that the dad in the scenario existed in the room? Nope. Again, same thing. All the nurses didn't direct a question to me, only to my wife and get it. My wife went through the thing, but didn't ask me about baby, didn't look at me, didn't say anything. And that was my wife was like, what the hell's going on here? Like you're here. Do they not see you? I'm like, I don't know. I I don't know how they can't, but excuse me. That's what happened. And that was my experience. And it kind of was that way through the whole duration of the stay. It was just kind of ridiculous. The TLC and the bedside manner all gone. And this is Thanksgiving Day. So I get it. You're working Thanksgiving Day. You're probably not exactly pumped, but Marge, the nurse, probably worked a few Thanksgiving days before. I think she liked it because it's usually quiet at the hospital. It was like people were pissed off that they had to work, which is really disappointing and underwhelming. And yeah, I just thought I'd share that from a male perspective. And I'll probably get heat for even having a perspective because it feels like that's the kind of world we live in lately, where I as a male can't talk about the birthing process, but I can because I was there, and I wanted to be able to have my wife have a better experience of it. And it could have been better if I was clued in on a few other things. So, and I don't want to get anybody in trouble. It was just one of those things where it seems like that process has gone by the wayside of what's best for insurance, and what hasn't, right? So either way, it was funny. We get home, and this is the topper of the bad being what we just heard. This is the good. We call the parents. It took us like forever to get checked out of that hospital. Like it was like who's on first trying to get out of that hospital. Oh, I thought this. So I thought this. So like, no, we just want to go. Can we go home? So we finally get home, and we pull up to our house, and we live in Chicago, and we live, in a street that's any other city street. And our neighbors were outside. They saw us come home. They all started clapping. And mind you, it's freezing outside. It's Thanksgiving Day. I'm sorry, it's Friday after now. That's when we got discharged, was on Friday. So Black Friday, we're home. It's freezing outside, it's flurrying, and our neighbors are outside clapping, cheering. They're like, raise the baby. So I did, the Lion King, hold the baby up in the air. They're clapping, cheering, the whole thing. And then we get in the house, take a deep breath. And that has been the first few days of my Willow baby girl in this world. So during all that process, I tried to post a story. It wasn't successful. I tried to keep people abreast of what's going on. And the Bears managed to somehow lose in a way that I don't think I've ever seen in my life. I remember we're watching this Bears game. I literally thought I was dreaming of how bad it was. It was just so bizarre. And another bizarre thing, in a good way, is that I mentioned I have two kids prior to Willow being here. And I have a daughter, Lucy's 15, and a son, Lincoln, who's 12. And, obviously it's from a different mom. And, this particular hospital, my son was born in. And so the ex-wife offers to bring the kids to the hospital. So this is a very modern family, I got to say. And she was a champ, man. My ex-wife, she brought the kids to the same hospital where she gave birth to our son, now to see their new half sister, Willow. And she not only came to the hospital with the kids, she came in the room, she held the baby, she made the kids hold the baby, and she brought us Thanksgiving leftovers from her family's Thanksgiving meal, and then also McDonald's, because she wasn't sure if McDonald's was open. There was nothing open. It was Thanksgiving. So we got McDonald's and leftover turkey, and it was great. It was well needed. And that sums up like my experience at the hospital. It was kind of a full circle thing with the ex being there, the kids, the new kid, the new wife, all intertwined. Very modern family. And my wife, and that concludes the story, I should say, of my wife had a baby on Thanksgiving. And that's the first of this podcast of the story, because now I'm on paternity leave. So a little different viewpoint, and I thought I'd document it and talk about it. And the next one, I'll get into a little bit more of what it's like since the week she's been on this planet. But I gotta go now because baby girl is getting a little upset. Well, maybe she's done. Nope, she wants her dad. So I'm gonna go. But thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to this. Stories from this78.com is the website, or on all your things. Subscribe, like all the YouTube things. But I gotta go. Baby Willow is calling. But thanks for listening, and I will talk to you later.